Throughout its storied history, the Marvel Universe has been the backdrop for some of the most iconic characters and stories in all of pop culture, with the battles featured in the pages of Spider-Man, the Avengers, the X-Men and beyond, forever changing the landscape of the superhero genre. There are no shortage of memorable moments that shook the Marvel Universe to its very core, whether it's the night Gwen Stacy died, the Dark Phoenix saga, the death of Captain America, or Thanos eradicating half of all existence. And because of this abundance of quintessential Marvel moments, fans have often wondered just how the comic book world would have changed if any of these stories had played out differently. And it's this curiosity that spurred Marvel to create their long-running anthology series, What If? As the name suggests, What If is a series of comics that reimagines classic Marvel moments and shows just what would have happened to the entire universe if they either didn't happen at all or did occur in a slightly different manner. Beginning in 1977 with What If Spider-Man Joined the Fantastic Four, this series has spanned a total of 13 volumes and has become a beloved aspect of Marvel's publishing line for decades, creating many of its own memorable stories and unique characters. And with this success, it's no surprise that the Marvel Cinematic Universe have sought to introduce their own version of What If, with the highly anticipated Disney Plus animated series currently getting underway. As such, in this video, I want to break down the history of the Marvel What If comics, explain just how this anthology series came to be, and what it might mean for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before we continue though, just a quick reminder to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and subscribe to Owen Likes Comics so you don't miss out on any future videos. The origins of the What If comic series began in 1972, when Stan Lee stepped down as editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics, becoming its publisher, and in his place, longtime writer Roy Thomas took over the reins as the new editor-in-chief. Thomas had begun working at Marvel as far back as 1965. Over the next 7 years at Marvel though, Thomas would work on titles such as Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos, Uncanny X-Men and the Avengers, creating a whole host of classic Marvel characters, including Wolverine, Luke Cage, Carol Danvers and Ultron. As such, his proven track record alongside his close friendship with Lee made Thomas an obvious choice to take over as editor-in-chief, and upon taking on this role, he still maintained his obligations as a writer, penning titles such as the Fantastic Four, whilst he also devised new ways to shake up the company's line of comics. Not only did he create a brand new team of heroes in the Defenders, initially comprised of Doctor Strange, Namor, Hulk and the Silver Surfer, but he also resurrected the Golden Age team, the Invaders. It was during Thomas's time working on Invaders that he got the idea for the What If anthology series. As Thomas explains in an interview with Sci-Fi Wire,
"Around the same time I conceived the Invaders, I came up with another way to handle major characters and yet not have to coordinate my stories with those of others, which I wasn't particularly in the mood to do just then. With What If, I would have a different cast, even with a different artist virtually every issue, and regular Marvel continuity wouldn't be affected."
According to longtime Marvel artist Ralph Macchio, the idea for What If originated from Thomas's mentor Stan Lee, who, when crafting his classic stories, would frequently ask what if questions about each character he would write. Taking inspiration from this, Thomas pitched the idea for this new series to Lee himself, with the publisher being easily won over by this fascinating concept. As he recalls,
"I always found it was easier to sell Stan on the idea to a series if I used a name or phrase that I knew he liked. Half the battle was already won. I included the idea that the Watcher would be the narrator because that would create a connection with the ongoing Marvel Universe. And I mentioned the first couple of stories I wanted to do. What if Spider-Man had joined the Fantastic Four in that story in Amazing Spider-Man #1? And what if the Hulk had kept Bruce Banner's intelligence? The Spidey FF thing was a no-brainer. The Hulk followed almost immediately."
With the initial bulk of stories now outlined, and with the approval of Marvel's publisher, Thomas got to work on bringing these out-of-continuity stories to life. Working alongside other writers such as Jim Shooter and Don Glutt, as well as artists like Jim Craig, Gil Kane and Jack Kirby, the original What If volume was comprised of 47 issues, released on a bi-monthly basis between February 1977 and October 1984. This initial volume is home to many many of the series' most notable stories, including the aforementioned What If Spider-Man Joined the Fantastic Four, which would serve as the plot for the first issue, as well as other stories such as What If Gwen Stacy had lived, What If Rick Jones had become the Hulk, and What If Captain America hadn't vanished during World War II. These fascinating takes on quintessential Marvel moments were often intertwined with more humorous and comedic scenarios as well, with issue 34, What If the Watcher Was a Comedian, featuring many comedic reimaginings of various heroes. Whilst it was clearly unlike anything Marvel had ever published before, this unique anthology series proved to be a surprise success, with the first volume not only selling well, but also particular stories such as issue 10's What If Jane Foster Found the Hammer of Thor, and issue 30's What If Spider-Man's Clone Had Lived, inspiring some of the biggest stories Marvel Comics would tell in later decades. However, following the release of What If issue 47, 1984's What If Loki Had Found Thor's Hammer, the series was actually cancelled by Marvel's new editor-in-chief Jim Shooter. It would return in the form of a one-shot 4 years later though, featuring a story entitled What If Iron Man Had Been a Traitor, and the success of this one-shot saw a revival and a second volume for the What If series, with volume 2 beginning publication in July of 1989. Unlike the first volume though, this second volume would see the What If comics now be published every month, as opposed to the bi-monthly format they had taken initially. Nevertheless, to me, outside of the original run of stories, this second volume is perhaps the most noteworthy in the entire series, as it not only experimented with the format of the What If books, with some stories now spanning multiple issues, as well as issues featuring multiple different endings. One great example of this came in issue 63, in which 3 alternate endings to a scenario in which War Machine failed to destroy the living laser were offered, allowing the reader to pick which one they preferred. In addition to these new approaches to storytelling, Volume 2 would also be notable for the creation of brand new characters as well, with perhaps the most well-known being that of Mayday Parker, who first appeared in What If issue 105. This comic, which reimagined what would have happened if Peter Parker and Mary Jane didn't lose their child in Amazing Spider-Man issue 418, envisaged a world where the couple's daughter would go on to become the superhero Spider-Girl, with this story proving particularly popular with readers, leading to it being spun off into a brand new universe where its stories would continue, known as MC2. Volume 2 of What If, though, would conclude in November 1998, and the series wouldn't actually return until 2005, with Marvel editor Justin Gabri crediting the current day editor-in-chief C.B. Cebulski as the person responsible for its resurrection. As Gabri explained to CBR,
"I wasn't around for it, but my understanding is that credit for bringing What If back for the 21st century belongs to one C.B. Cebulski. Siebes wanted to see the return of the classic What Ifs and the cool factor the original series in the late 70s and early 80s had. They used to have a bi-monthly schedule, and each issue seemed special. As longtime fans of What If might remember, the original title took the form of a consecutively numbered ongoing series. I think the 90s version of the series lost its uniqueness. The ideas got generic in order to keep up with the monthly schedule it was on. So CB pitched it, and Marvel decided to give it a shot by approving 6 standalone specials at the end of the year.
Since the release of Volume 3 in February 2005, What If has largely remained an annually released one-shot series of comics, usually published as volumes of between 5 to 10 standalone issues. These modern What If comics have both reimagined some of the company's biggest stories over the past 2 decades, such as Age of Ultron, Planet Hulk, and House of M, as well as adopting an approach similar to DC's Elseworlds imprint, reimagining Marvel heroes in different settings and time periods, with Volume 4 in particular giving us stories that saw Captain America fight in the American Civil War, and a Soviet incarnation of the Fantastic Four. Even still today, the What If comics remain a beloved fixture of Marvel's annual publishing, with generations of both comic book readers and those within the industry having grown up loving the original volumes of stories. As a result, the What If comics are a celebrated piece of Marvel history, and given the amount of goodwill held towards them, it's unsurprising that the company would be keen to adapt the format into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, carrying on this long-standing tradition of fantastical and fascinating alternate stories into the pop culture sensation that Marvel has evolved into today. Now that we've outlined the history of What If and its place within Marvel Comics, the question remains, what can these books tell us about the ongoing What If animated show, and the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general? Well, to answer that question, I'd actually like to introduce fellow YouTuber Nando v Movies, who will explain why he thinks these comics are so great, and discuss what the animated What If show can learn from its printed counterparts, and hopefully offer the same sense of wonder and creativity that the comic books have for decades.
I don't remember when I was introduced to What If comics. It's been a very long time. But for me, there are two kinds of What If comics that I love. There are the zany old ones that I really appreciate, and then the new ones that are just plain good. The best example of the old ones, for me, is the What If the Fantastic Four Had Different Powers. It's one of the first to be released in 1977, was written by Roy Thomas. The issue features the Fantastic Four each getting completely different powers that are suited to different aspects of each character's personality. Kind of like the Fantastic Four originally got powers, like Ben's the tough guy, so he gets made tough as rocks, right? Like that, plus some cosmic rays, is how the Fantastic Four's original powers were explained. So they did that again, except they picked different elements of each character. So Mechanic Johnny becomes an android. Pilot Ben gets wings. Flexible Susan gets stretchy powers. And Reed Richards turns into a literal floating brain. It is a truly wacky yet completely believable origin for a team we know and love that really only feels silly because it's not the team we are familiar with. And that's part of the magic of the series. By the end, you have this completely different team, but with personalities we already know. You can imagine their further adventures. How did they take on the Silver Surfer? How do they fight Galactus? Do Reed and Sue still have kids? Can they? Because like I said, he's a big floating brain. It's a world of endless possibilities only limited by your imagination. And then for new ones, you've got Magic by Leo Williams from 2018. Easily my favorite What If story, except for this new thing that's a little different. I'll explain. But Magic pairs young Illyana Rasputin with Doctor Strange in the mentee-mentor relationship, as Strange tries to help Illyana move past her torture in limbo so she can achieve her true potential, becoming the next Sorcerer Supreme. It fills an interesting void as an X-Men fan. We have this character like Illyana who ended up joining the New Mutants after her ordeal with Belasco in limbo. But if she walked a different path, led by someone who is uniquely familiar with magic, but more importantly, tragedy and organizing the chaos of the universe, maybe Illyana could have had a better life, or at least a different one. It's kind of nice to see, almost cathartic. To watch a character get something they always needed, but because of the confines of the story at the time, could not have. It's so difficult to say why exactly a What If story works, but I think the key is the writers. Every writer is given an opportunity to create a story they've always wondered about, put it to paper. It's essentially professional fan fiction. And there's something charming about fan fiction, wish fulfillment. Or the opposite, just watching disaster unfold. And when you know that there aren't consequences, that this can go any way because the future of these characters in the larger universe is not at stake, it adds weight to their actions. The Magic story is a great example. There's a moment where Strange has the demon Belasco, who tortured Illyana in limbo, trapped in a spell. But it seems like Belasco might be able to break free because, we don't know too much about what he can do in this situation. And I remember being genuinely worried. This could be the death of this Doctor Strange. His death. Forever. And you don't really get that in comics anymore, at least not from the big two publishers. Nothing is final. No one's ever really gone. I mean, Marvel right now is currently building towards a Death of Doctor Strange story, and I guarantee he is not still dead in 2 years. Heck, he'll probably be alive by next April or whenever Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is set to be released. But the Doctor Strange in the What If version could have died in that moment forever. And even though the universe ends at the end of this book, it feels a little different. The fact that anything can happen really builds tension in a way that is somewhat unique to What If comics. And the great thing about What If stories is that it seems like they may kind of be changing. I'm genuinely very excited for the future of the line, having just finished Spider's Shadow by Chip Zdarsky, which does apparently count as a What If story, according to its own cover. In it, Peter keeps the symbiote and calamity ensues. Friends become enemies, enemies become friends, people die. It's great. And it really feels like a fully realized story told over 5 issues. You get time for serious character development, well-realized set pieces. I'd love to see more of these. One creative team working on a short, what-if series focusing on the answer to one classic question. And the thing that I really hope Marvel is able to adapt is this idea that, like I said, what-ifs are very much fan fiction written by professionals. It needs to be able to be silly, to do dumb things that ultimately might not go anywhere, but would make for an entertaining little story. I hope What If does not lose that disposability. At the end of the day, the most memorable What If stories are kind of risky. Characters die, universes are destroyed, and that's the end. And even though in What If comics the characters usually don't return or cross over, those stories can teach us important things about the characters in the main continuity as well. It's not just pointless. If you read a story where Iron Man dies and then everything goes to hell, it makes you appreciate that character in other stories. And if Tony doesn't make a suit but gets the powers of Thor, let's say that's the story, you learn what is essential to that character, what never changes about Tony Stark no matter what origin he has. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is that these episodes each tell a compelling story. I hoped that these would not connect at all, that every episode would be separate from the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but also from each other. I'd have even loved it if every episode was written and created by a completely different creative team, kind of like what Star Wars Visions seems to be up to, but that does not appear to be the case. For better or worse, everything in the Marvel Cinematic Universe needs to be connected, which is kind of a bummer. However, spoilers for episode 1, I did enjoy the moment where Red Skull just dies, unceremoniously gets squished. As long as anything can happen in a what if, these stories can work.
So, in short, the What If comics have always represented Marvel at their most creative. At their best, these stories are outlandish, mind-blowing, and full of unbridled creativity. Like Nando said, they're essentially fanfictions brought to life by comic writers, based on the stories that made them fall in love with the Marvel Universe to begin with. The What If series has been home to so many now classic characters and stories, and it's because of this long and storied history that I find it so heartwarming to see this beloved series be finally brought over to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Having watched the first few episodes of the What If animated series, I was pleasantly surprised to see that, much like its comic book counterpart, this show offers fascinating reimaginings of some of the MCU's biggest and most iconic moments. And to borrow a phrase from Nando, it demonstrates that one small change to the status quo can truly make a monumental difference. To me, the What If show not only represents an interesting new approach to storytelling for the MCU, but it also represents the revival of something that has entertained and fascinated comic book fans for generations. The What If comics have for decades been a treasured corner of the Marvel Universe, a place for stories you'd never find anywhere else, brought to life by sheer creativity and love for the characters that it features. When it first began in the 1970s, What If was a series unlike anything Marvel had ever attempted previously, and against all odds, it gave readers so many seminal moments and stories. And more so than anything, I can only hope that the impacts and significance of these classic comics can be fully realised and brought to life in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's own version of What If. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please make sure to leave a like on this video and leave a comment down below as well. Let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in today's video. I can't wait to hear what you have to say as always. I want to give a big special thanks to Nando v Movies for helping me explain the history of the What If comics. I will leave links to his socials and his YouTube channel in the description, so do go and check out Nando's work if you're not already familiar. I really appreciate his help on this video. If you enjoyed this video though and you want some more, there should be some others on screen right now as well. And if you're new to Owen Likes Comics, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notify bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. If you want some more of me, you can follow me on Twitter just at Owen Likes Comics. And if you want to help support the channel and help me make more videos, you can do so over at patreon.com/OwenLikesComics. But that's all for this video though. Again, I hope you enjoyed it and hopefully I'll see you all next time. But until then, take care and keep reading.